imagine being given a second chance at life, only to make the same heartbreaking choice again? What if the person who tried to kill you once became the one you chose to love again? This is the story of Edwina Martin, a woman who survived an attempt on her life by her ex-boyfriend, Danny Brown Jr., only to marry him shortly after. Against all odds, she returned to the man who had once plotted her murder, believing in love despite the warning signs. But fate would not be kind. 11 years after that first violent attempt, Edwina's life would be cut short by the very man she had trusted. A cycle of control, manipulation, and tragedy led to her death. And now the world is left to ask, could Edwina have escaped this fate? Or was she doomed the moment she denied justice for the love of her life who died trying to save her? Stay with me as we dive into a story of love, betrayal, and the haunting consequences of choosing forgiveness over justice. The path Edwina took wasn't just about love, it was about the lies that kept her trapped and the price she paid for believing in change. Edwina Martin's life was one of strength and resilience, a story shaped by love, determination, and the dream of a better future. Born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas, Edwina was no stranger to hard work. From a young age, she threw herself into her community, committed to bettering the lives of those around her. She was a mother, a businesswoman, and a coach, someone who balanced the demands of family life with the ambition to make a mark in the world. She started her career as a phlebotomist, helping others by drawing blood with the precision and care that reflected her dedication. But Edwina's true passion was found in her community. She was a dance coach for the Bejeweled dance team, pouring her heart into nurturing the talent of young girls, teaching them not just the art of dance, but the importance of discipline, respect, and teamwork. Edwina's impact was felt deeply by the girls she coached. But, as we know, appearances can be deceiving. How do you think a person who is so involved in their community and family life can end up in an abusive relationship? Have you ever wondered how someone so strong could be trapped in such a situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Alongside her work as a dance coach, Edwina launched her own business, Bodacious Beauty Boutique, a clothing line that became a staple in her local community. The boutique became a symbol of Edwina's entrepreneurial spirit, reflecting her creativity and drive. She balanced her career with her family life, raising her children with pride and ensuring that they knew how important they were to her. Edwina was active in her community, always eager to support local causes and make a difference where she could. To those around her, Edwina seemed like a woman who had it all. She was strong, independent, and dedicated to her family and work. But behind the scenes, her personal life with her husband Danny Brown Jr. was more complicated, and it was here that she would face the most difficult challenge of her life. Danny Brown Jr. came from a troubled past. Born in 1986, he had a history of criminal behavior and violent tendencies. Growing up in Little Rock, he had a history of making poor choices and using violence to resolve conflicts. At just 17 years old, he was convicted of manslaughter after a robbery gone wrong. One of his accomplices was killed, and Danny was sentenced to prison for his role in the crime. This incident set the tone for much of Danny's adult life, a life marked by violence and run-ins with the law. Even after serving time for manslaughter, Danny's life wasn't anything near peaceful. He was arrested multiple times for charges such as domestic battery, a sign that the violence that marked his youth had continued into adulthood. The pattern of abuse continued, showing Danny's deep capacity for aggression, even toward the people closest to him. Do you think someone with a past like Danny's is capable of change, or do you think past behavior always repeats itself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Despite his violent history, Danny managed to draw people in with his charm, including Edwina. When they first met, it seemed like Edwina had found someone who understood her, someone who could offer support during difficult times. But as their relationship progressed, it quickly became clear that Danny's affection was tainted by control and manipulation. Over time, he used emotional abuse, intimidation, and physical violence to hold Edwina captive in a relationship she could never escape from. This dynamic wasn't immediately clear to those around them. After all, Danny was good at hiding his true nature when it suited him. But in the privacy of their home, Edwina's love for him was slowly replaced by fear. She tried to leave several times, but each time, she found herself pulled back and drawn into his web of manipulation. And so, the cycle continued. Little Rock, Arkansas, is a city known for its southern charm, scenic river views, and rich cultural history. The city is home to many families who call it their safe haven, and on the outside, it's easy to imagine it as the ideal place to raise children and build a life. But for Edwina, Little Rock became a place where her dreams of safety and happiness collided with the harsh reality of domestic abuse. The city may have appeared picturesque, but it also hid the secrets of a broken relationship, one that seemed to have no way out. Little Rock's small-town atmosphere meant that everyone knew everyone, making it hard for Edwina to escape the watchful eyes of Danny. The couple, to the outside world, seemed like just another family trying to make it work. But behind closed doors, Edwina lived in constant fear. Danny's grip on her life grew tighter with each passing day. And this is where the contrast between the public and private lives of Edwina and Danny becomes so important. From the outside, they looked like a family on the surface, one of many in Little Rock. But behind the scenes, there were constant fights, manipulation, and fear. How often do you think people hide their true struggles behind a perfect exterior? Have you ever experienced or witnessed something like this in your community? Feel free to share in the comments. To the people in Little Rock who knew them, Edwina and Danny seemed like a happy couple of family with children, working hard, and contributing to their community. They attended local events, went out with friends, and often shared moments of joy on social media. No one could have guessed what was happening behind closed doors. To the casual observer, they were just another couple making their way through life. But beneath the surface, Edwina was facing a nightmare that no one saw coming. And so, as Edwina worked to maintain her place in the community, she found herself sinking deeper into a relationship where the love she once knew had turned into something unrecognizable, where fear began to take the place of affection. As we reflect on this, consider how difficult it must have been for Edwina to reconcile the love she felt for Danny with the abuse she suffered. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Do you think it's ever possible to leave a relationship that has such a strong emotional hold on you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Edwina's story is one of complex emotions. Let's rewind back to the first incident and the attack on Edwina and her boyfriend that was killed. Daniel Hill, as understanding her background is essential to understanding the full depth of the tragedy that would eventually unfold. On the evening of January 3rd, 2012, Edwina Martin and her new boyfriend, Daniel Hill, had no idea that their lives would soon be torn apart. The two had been dating for a short time, and despite Edwina's tumultuous past, she had found a glimmer of happiness in Daniel. They were at Edwina's mother's house, preparing to pick up her children, as was their usual routine. Edwina's kids were with their father, Danny Brown Jr., who had custody during certain times, and she had arranged to meet him there to retrieve them. But when Edwina and Daniel arrived at the house that evening, the familiar routine was shattered. Instead of a peaceful exchange of custody, they were met with the sound of gunshots. Two armed men emerged from the shadows, and without warning, they opened fire. Daniel Hill was hit immediately, shot in the head as he tried to protect Edwina. He collapsed in front of her, his life taken in an instant. Edwina was struck as well, a bullet tearing into her chest and another into her hip. But somehow, despite the shock and pain, she managed to survive. The attackers, having completed their mission, fled the scene. Edwina, barely able to move, struggled to stay conscious as she crawled into another room. She found some shelter under a chair, her life hanging by a thread. The sound of sirens filled the air, and soon paramedics arrived to find Edwina, barely clinging to life. Her blood stained the floor, and her body was riddled with wounds. Daniel Hill, her new boyfriend, was already gone. His efforts to protect her had cost him his life, and Edwina was left to deal with the devastating reality that the man who had tried to take her life was still out there, and was the very person she had tried to escape. After being rushed to the hospital, Edwina's survival was nothing short of miraculous. Despite her severe injuries, including gunshot wounds to the chest and hip, she managed to pull through. The physical toll was immense, but the emotional weight she carried was even heavier. In the aftermath of the attack, the investigation quickly revealed the horrifying truth. Danny Brown Jr. had orchestrated the shooting. He had hired two men to carry out the brutal attack, driven by a twisted jealousy and anger over Edwina's decision to move on from him and start a new relationship with Daniel Hill. But even with the truth laid bare, Edwina's response to the situation left many questioning her motives. Instead of helping authorities bring Danny to justice, Edwina chose to remain silent. She refused to testify, even though she knew Danny was the one responsible for what had happened to her and Daniel. Why would she make such a decision? It's difficult to say, but Edwina's refusal to cooperate with the authorities can likely be attributed to the deep psychological hold that Danny had on her. Despite everything he had done, Edwina was still tied to him by love, guilt, and fear. Her refusal to testify wasn't just an act of silence. It was a response to years of emotional manipulation and the overwhelming influence Danny had over her life. Her decision led to a devastating consequence. The charges against Danny Brown Jr. were dropped. Without Edwina's testimony, there was not enough evidence to convict him. Despite being the mastermind behind the attack that left her wounded and killed Daniel Hill, Danny was allowed to walk free. Edwina's choice to deny justice for Daniel Hill and to protect Danny Brown Jr. allowed him to continue his life as though nothing had happened. The lack of justice for Daniel's death and the absence of accountability for Danny meant that Edwina had to live with the consequences of her decision every single day. The man who had nearly killed her was free, and there was nothing she could do to change that. Danny went on with his life, untouched by the consequences of his actions. He had nearly taken Edwina's life, and in a twisted turn, he was now free to continue manipulating and controlling her. Edwina's refusal to cooperate with the authorities didn't just leave her in a cycle of emotional turmoil. It meant that the justice system was denied the chance to hold Danny accountable. The lack of closure for Daniel Hill's family was just as devastating. The man responsible for his death was walking free, thanks to Edwina's silence. Edwina's story is a tragic reminder of how complex abusive relationships can be. No matter how much someone wants to break free, the emotional and psychological hold an abuser has can be nearly impossible to escape. For Edwina, her decision to stay silent in the face of overwhelming evidence was a painful one, but it was a decision made out of love, fear, and a belief that things might change despite all the evidence to the contrary. What do you think? Could you understand Edwina's decision to protect the man who had tried to kill her? Or do you believe justice should have been served, no matter the personal cost? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The first attack was a tragic moment in Edwina's life, but it would not be the last. Despite surviving that night, Edwina was trapped in a cycle of fear and manipulation that would ultimately cost her even more than she could have imagined. Her story didn't end there, but the consequences of her choices would haunt her for years to come. But there's a twist to this story, and what happened next would even become more shocking. Imagine surviving the most horrifying attack of your life. You're left for dead, your new boyfriend is shot and killed in front of you, and the man responsible for it all is someone you once loved. What do you do next? Most people would walk away, seek justice, and try to move forward. But Edwina Martin, she chose a different path. Just 2 weeks after being shot, just days after burying Daniel Hill, Edwina made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She chose to reconcile with Danny Brown Jr., the man who had orchestrated the attack on her life. She didn't just forgive him, she married him. It's hard to understand, isn't it? After all that happened, why would Edwina choose to go back to the man who nearly took her life? Why would anyone make that choice? But that's the reality of abusive relationships. The hold that a manipulative, controlling partner can have over someone is deeper and more complex than many realize. It's not just about love, it's about fear, dependence, and the twisted belief that things could change. And in Edwina's case, she wanted to believe that Danny could change. She thought that maybe, just maybe, their love was enough to heal the wounds he had inflicted. She married him because she believed, against all evidence, that their past could be erased, that the cycle of abuse could somehow end. But Edwina wasn't the only one who was manipulated. Danny knew exactly how to pull her back in. He had done it before, and now, after almost killing her, he knew exactly what to say and do to make her come back to him. He played the part of the loving, remorseful partner. He promised things would be different. He convinced her that he was sorry, that he would change. And Edwina, lost in the fog of trauma and love, believed him. What do you think? Would you be able to walk away from someone you once loved, even after everything they did? Or do you think Edwina was trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button and hit the notification so you don't miss out on more interesting stories like this. The sun was just beginning to rise over Little Rock, Arkansas, on the morning of March 27, 2023. The world was still in the soft quiet of early hours, but for Edwina Martin, this would be the day that changed everything. She had already begun making bold moves toward breaking free from a marriage that had suffocated her for years of manipulation, fear, and pain. After a lifetime of emotional and physical abuse at the hands of Danny Brown Jr., Edwina had finally reached a point where she could no longer stay in the life he had created for her. She had opened a separate bank account. She had reached out to domestic violence organizations, seeking guidance, support, and the strength to leave. She was carefully planning her escape. The plan wasn't perfect. There was still fear in her heart, doubt in her mind, but Ed was determined. She wasn't going to let Danny control her any longer. She wanted to take back her life. She wanted to be free. But that morning, Danny sensed it. He could feel the shift, the change, the loss of control. And he wasn't going to let her go so easily. As the day unfolded, the tension between them escalated. The details of what happened in the house that morning are still hazy, but neighbors would later report hearing shouting, the sounds of something breaking, and then, finally, the unmistakable noise of a struggle. The fight between Edwina and Danny had turned violent. This was no longer just a disagreement. This was a final confrontation. The sounds from inside Edwina's home echoed down the street. The struggle was intense. Edwina's voice, once full of hope and determination, was now drowned out by Danny's rage. The man who had controlled her life for so long wasn't going to let her walk away from him without a fight. He grabbed a gun, and in a moment of fury, he fired. Can you imagine the terror Edwina must have felt in that moment? She had already been through so much, and now this. It was as if her entire life had been leading to this tragic moment. Do you think she ever truly felt safe again? Or was the fear always there, even when she tried to plan her escape? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. When the police arrived, they found Edwina's lifeless body. It was clear from the evidence at the scene, the signs of struggle, and the fact that she was shot at close range, that Danny was the perpetrator. His history of violence, the previous attack he had orchestrated, and the sheer brutality of this new act of violence pointed directly to him. Authorities quickly launched an investigation, gathering evidence that led them straight to Danny Brown Jr. He was now the prime suspect, and the trail was clear. But by the time the police arrived, Danny was gone. He had fled the scene, disappearing without a trace. What do you think was going through Danny's mind as he ran from the scene? Was he thinking of the consequences, or was it all about maintaining control and escaping capture? Can you imagine what Edwina's family was going through at that moment? Share your thoughts below. Danny's flight was just the beginning of a tense and heart-pounding 21-day manhunt. He went into hiding, holed up in a motel in a nearby town, trying to remain undetected, but authorities were closing in. Despite his best efforts, Danny couldn't outrun the inevitable. The search for him intensified, and law enforcement agencies worked around the clock to locate him. For 21 days, Edwina's family, her friends, and the entire community were left in suspense. Would Danny get away? Would justice ever be served for Edwina? The uncertainty was excruciating, especially for those who had witnessed her pain for years. Then, on April 17, 2023, after more than 3 weeks of searching, Danny was finally caught. Law enforcement tracked him to a motel, and in a routine traffic stop he was apprehended. His capture brought a sense of relief, but it also opened a floodgate of emotions. For Edwina's family and the community, there was no celebration, just a quiet acknowledgement that one chapter of this tragic story had closed, but the wounds would remain forever. Do you think Danny should have been caught earlier? Why do you think he was able to hide for so long? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Danny Brown Jr. was arrested and charged with the murder of Edwina Martin. His capture marked the end of a long period of fear and uncertainty. But for those who loved Edwina, it was little consolation. She was gone. The woman who had worked so hard to survive, to rebuild her life, was no longer there to see her children grow up, to pursue her dreams, or to find the peace she so desperately needed. Her life was cut short by the very man who had promised to love her but had instead destroyed her. This case raises so many questions about the power of manipulation and the cycles of abuse. Can someone ever truly escape from a relationship like Edwina's? What should society do to help break these cycles before it's too late? Share your thoughts in the comments. Edwina's story is one of incredible strength but also of heartbreaking tragedy. She had the courage to plan her escape. She reached out for help. She tried. But in the end, the man who had controlled her for so long was able to take it all away. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of support systems, of reaching out to others, and of the dangers that many women face in silence. As the legal process continues, the focus now is on remembering Edwina's life and ensuring that her story serves as a beacon for others trapped in similar situations. Her death is not the end of her story. Her life, her courage, and her struggle will continue to inspire those who fight against the darkness of abuse. The day Edwina Martin's life was stolen from her, the ripples were felt far and wide by her children, her family, her friends, and even by those who had only known her in passing. The news of her tragic death spread quickly, leaving the people who loved her in a state of shock and disbelief. But it was her children who would bear the brunt of this loss. Imagine the weight of that day for them. Their mother, the woman who had fought so hard to give them a better life, was now gone. Not just gone, but taken by the very man she had loved, her husband, Danny Brown Jr. They had witnessed her struggles for years, though they didn't fully understand the depth of the abuse she faced behind closed doors. But no child is ever truly oblivious to the toll a toxic relationship can take. The constant fear, the emotional strain. Edwina had always tried to shield them, but now they were forced to confront the brutal reality that their mother was gone forever. Her death didn't just rob them of their mother, it left them questioning everything they had known. Was there anything they could have done to save her? Could they have intervened? These are questions that will haunt them forever. And then there's the extended family. Edwina's mother, siblings, and relatives had watched as she tried to break free, over and over again. They knew something wasn't right, they saw the signs. But they, like so many others, never understood the full extent of Danny's control over her. For them, her death was a crushing blow. They had loved her, supported her, and done what they could, but when the final confrontation came, they were left powerless, their voices drowned out by the overwhelming silence of abuse. Can you imagine the weight of their grief? How do you think they managed to find the strength to go on, knowing their loved one had been taken from them in such a violent, unjust way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. When Edwina's family and community reflected on the years she spent in fear, it became clear that her death was not just an isolated incident. It was the painful culmination of a broken system and a toxic relationship that had gone unchecked for far too long. It underscored how challenging it is for victims of domestic violence to break free, especially when the person controlling them is someone they once loved, someone they once trusted. The emotional toll of living in fear every day was something that no one outside of those relationships could fully understand, but Edwina's death was a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of that control. Her family, despite their grief, turned their pain into action. They became vocal advocates for change, for better resources, and for stronger laws to protect victims of domestic violence. They refused to let Edwina's story fade away without making sure it counted for something. Her death had to mean more than just tragedy, it had to be the catalyst for change. Do you think Edwina's death could be a turning point in the fight against domestic violence? How can we better support victims who feel trapped just like Edwina? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Her legacy, though tragic, became a symbol of resilience. It sparked conversations in communities across the country about the complexities of domestic abuse, about how often victims are isolated, how they feel like they have no one to turn to. It sparked a new movement, one that said no more. No more silence, no more fear. The time to act was now. Edwina's children, though devastated, grew stronger as the days passed. They found comfort in knowing that their mother had fought for them until the very end. Her love for them was unwavering. Even in the darkest moments, they knew she had done everything she could to give them a better life. And even though she was gone, her memory, her spirit, and her determination to protect them would live on. How do you think Edwina's children will remember her? What kind of legacy do you think she left behind? As the community of Little Rock mourned, they also came together. They rallied behind Edwina's family, supporting them through the painful process of healing. They didn't just mourn her loss, they honored her memory by ensuring that her story would not be forgotten. They fought for the change that Edwina had wanted to see, and they made sure her death was not in vain. Edwina's story serves as a wake-up call for society. It's a reminder that domestic violence is not something that only affects those who live in fear behind closed doors. It affects us all. And it's up to each of us to make sure that we stand with those who are trapped in silence, to raise our voices and demand change. Because if we don't, we risk losing more lives, more families, more futures. As we reflect on Edwina Martin's story, we're left with a question that haunts the heart of everyone who hears it. What could have been done differently? What was the turning point that led to her tragic fate? Could she have escaped the cycle of control and manipulation earlier? Could the justice system have intervened sooner? And should those around her have recognized the warning signs before it was too late? It's easy to say that we should have seen it coming, but the truth is, domestic violence is insidious. It creeps in slowly, wears away at a person's sense of self, and isolates them from the world. But what do you think? Was there a turning point in Edwina's life where things could have been different? What do you believe could have changed the course of her story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective on what could have been done differently, and how we can work together to prevent tragedies like this from happening to others. This isn't just Edwina's story, it's a story that plays out in homes across the world every day. It's a reminder of the importance of recognizing signs of abuse, offering support to those in need, and speaking out against domestic violence. The more we talk about it, the more we can help others break free from the cycle before it's too late. Share this video to help raise awareness about domestic violence. We all need to do our part to make sure that stories like Edwina's don't end in tragedy. By sharing her story, you're making sure her voice is heard. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with more true crime stories that bring awareness to the hidden struggles that so many face. We all have a role to play in ending domestic violence. Together we can help break the silence and stop the cycle. Thank you for being a part of that effort.